Hi, Vinnie.
Hello, Pandora. How are you?
You know, I'm doing pretty well today. I'm in Maine and it's foggy and it was really rainy earlier. It's no longer as much of a torrential downpour. We needed the rain, but I love this kind of day. I feel it can be energizing and comforting at the same time. How's it in New York?
Well, we have a very sunny day, and there's a nice little breeze. It's supposed to get hot later. We've had thunderstorms every day this week.
Oh.
And I'm enjoying, I have a robin's nest outside my front window, and I've been enjoying taking photographs of them.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because those photographs are amazing. Did you train as a photographer, or is this always been a hobby? What?
It's a hobby.
It's a hobby.
I didn't train as a photographer. I have no formal classes in photography, but
you have a great eye.
Thank you, and I've been told that, and I enjoy it, and that's, as long as I enjoy it, I'll continue to do it.
Well, I think that's a good reason to continue to do anything when we have the choice, or believe we have the choice. What comes through in the pictures of the robins and the babies is so much, I think, about your heart. I met you at AWoW in New York, Artists Without Walls, and I don't know, we just sort of hit it off. I don't even remember whether there were introductions made or you introduced yourself, but it's always been so comfortable to talk with you. That's why I wanted you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I remember the first night you were down there with your
Eric?
other, huh?
Was I there with Eric? Probably the first time.
No, what's her name? Oh, God, I can't remember her name now. The artist.
Let's see, an artist.
She just moved. She just bought a farm with a couple of her sons.
Oh, yeah, Catherine.
Catherine.
Yes. Well, Catherine, good point, in Newburyport, Mass, had introduced me online to Charles and a couple of other people. And this is a little off the topic I had for today, but it's a worthwhile one because I really had it on my want list, which I talked about in the first podcast. What do you want? I really wanted to spend more time in New York. I lived in Massachusetts, and my daughter had lived in Queens for a short time, but it was very evident that I was terrified of making the trek, especially by myself. So we were coming to see Connie Roberts' book launch.
Right.
Beautiful book of poetry called Little Witness. Wow. And that was on
Very
a Sunday.
powerful. Yeah.
Yes, very powerful. You know, I find that in doing this show, people say content is king. I don't run out of ideas. One leads to 10 more. But meeting Connie and going for her book launch was a very important decision. I had never met her, but I don't think. But just the idea of someone successfully completing their book, I thought I want to support that. So I called Catherine, and she was game to just jump in the car and make the 4.5 hour or whatever.
You know, that's where we met, Artists Without Walls.
Charles Hale, Neve Highland.
Yeah, and Tom Miles introduced me. Tom had been out to a show that I did exhibiting my paintings. And he said, I belong to this group, and it's a group of artists, and you really ought to come down. And I said, I need to get out. And I did need to get out because if you're going to flourish as an artist, you need to know what other artists are doing, even if it's not in your field. You got to hear poets, writers, singers. I mean, that has been just a wonderful venue.
You know, again, this is how we end up. What do the kids say? This is how we roll. This is how you and I end up chit-chatting, and it's always so fascinating. But I think you just hit on an important point. When I, well, I don't say when I learned about art, but some of my early thinking as it pertained to art was that it all had to be original, as though there is such a thing. And I think it was my brother-in-law, he's deceased, what a wonderful guy, Dale Busfield. He's a landscape architect, a very talented artist himself, a pianist. And one day he said, well, there's really nothing original. It's what you bring to it, that you know, people can have spoken or painted or written about the same subject over and over, but your take is what makes it different or unique. And I really valued that because it, you know, think about, I don't know if you did this, but you know, covering your work when you were in school, like, so people couldn't copy it. Or did you not do that? I don't know. We were told to put our hands like, I don't know.
Absolutely, you know. Yeah, like you're right. Like anything is new. I mean, anybody that has studied the Greek plays, for example, you're going back 2,500 years. Euripides, etc., Sophocles, all of those guys, and you read the morals in those plays. There's nothing different from today. You know, you can go back and you can read any one. The only thing that's different is the setting. The people's emotions are the same. The sins are the same. The greed, the avarice, the kindness, the love, it's all there. So it's, as you said, just somebody else's take on it. When you add
that whole good versus evil, and on a show I taped the other day with John Moran, also an Artist Without Walls patron and artist, he referenced Marcus Aurelius's Meditations as something worthwhile to look into with regard to COVID and obviously the plague that happened in Rome. And I after the show, I couldn't wait to look it up because I hadn't heard of them. And you know, if you're interested, there's an amazing video.
I saw the video.
Oh, I sent it to you. Oh, okay.
Yes, sent it to me, and I watched it. And you know, that's you know, another example. If you want to go to Boccaccio, and you know, he wrote a book, 100 Nights, and those were stories that were shared by people who were hoping that the Black Plague would go by.
Right.
You know, so yeah, this is not the first time we've had a pandemic. It's not the first time we've had a plague. We've had numerous, and you know, one of the things that I enjoyed about the Marcus Aurelius was that, you know, they basically did the same thing. They shut down.
They did. They shut down. He stayed in Rome, which surprised me. The shocking part was that it went on for 15 years. When I reached that point in the video, I was humbled, and I had just read something about this maybe lasting 5 years, and I'm not making predictions on my show, but if that is the case, that we are certainly in this new place of awareness and respect for germs and coexisting. You know, I think John pointed out that age-wise, many of us haven't lived through a very serious, life-threatening health scare like polio, or I think when the COVID came up, they were comparing it to 1918, the flu. But yeah, I think the positive thing that came out of the Marcus Aurelius video was, or his meditations, is that we'll survive. And
Yeah.
this has happened before. This is what happens. But the scary thing, I think, was the variable around whether people embrace a common commitment to how to get through it. That's the ancient art of philosophy. How we do anything means everything. So I don't know. And this, you know, I was driving in today to the studio, our art studio here, and thinking, you know, I love to talk with Vinnie. We have so many things we can talk about, but it's kind of funny. You mentioned your understanding of Greek literature, because my first name, Pandora.
I know the mythology behind it.
Well, I'm glad you do, because I'll tell you a little story. I was probably 12 or 13 before I learned that it wasn't just a box, an insatiable curiosity, and Pandora opening the box and letting out all the evil in the world, which is all I had learned up until that age. But a sage sailor, I was going to say a sage Swedish sailor, but that's a lot, was fascinated by my name at a family gathering, and he, as a someone in the Navy, you might appreciate, he had the enormous anchors tattooed on both forearms. I thought I was with Popeye because he was air challenged too. And we were sitting on the porch, the front porch of a two-family in Waltham, Mass, with the street light on us. I'll never forget it. Beautiful summer night. And he looked at me and he said, well, sailors love the name Pandora. And I really didn't hear that too often.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know why. And he said, well, you know, we believe she brings us luck. And that also was not reading, you know, computing.
Contrary to what you heard.
So he filled me in on the end of the story that, yes, Zeus set up this trap and so forth. And you can correct me on the accuracy, but the evil did escape, but the last thing out was hope. Is that your version?
That's the way, yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard that.
It's interesting, you know, a name like that with a mythology behind it, it's got to have an impact, especially when most of the time, don't do that, you're opening Pandora's box.
Exactly.
And the negative connotations that go with it.
Yeah.
I can just imagine, you know, what happened with that.
It was heavy. It was very heavy as a kid
Yeah.
to have that. Yeah. And people
Did you
ask
ever get
me,
a chance to ask why?
did people ask me?
No, or did you ask your parents how that name was?
Well, yeah, I did. It kind of drove my mom crazy at one point, because I tried to use some humor and saying, you know, Mom, I need a good story for a dinner party. What was the deal? And you had to know my mom to appreciate one of the times where it's possible I had worn her down, but she just looked at me and she said, maybe I was just tired, only with a Boston accent. Maybe I was tired. And I thought, that is not okay, you know, for the name. But eventually she said, you know, people used to ask me if I was Greek. We're not. My dad was someone who loved history, but he taught U.S. history. So all these things didn't make sense. Eventually she said, well, he just thought it went nice with the middle name Lee. And I thought, wow, I need a better story than this. You know? But you're right. The Pandora's box has had a tremendous amount of negative connotation, even when people have meant well. Many have commented that it's a great name for a therapist. I don't know. I don't know why that is. But what about your name? I mean, as I started to say when I was driving in, I thought one of the shows was What Do You Want? And today I thought, what's in a name? We've talked about how parents raise their children in their own image to fit into the world the way they see it. And, you know, when they choose a name, I guess there is a story of some sort, maybe better than mine. How have you fared with your name? Tell me about that.
Number one, mostly Vinnie is Vincent.
Yeah.
associated with Italian. Okay.
Yep.
I'm half Italian, but by my complexion, you'd never look at it. You'd never notice. Oddly enough, the only one that ever called me Vincent was my mom.
Yeah.
There were a lot of takes on that. My Italian grandmother used to call me Vincie. And
that's cute.
Guys in the neighborhood call me Vinnie the Guinea.
That's not so cute.
Hmm?
That's not so cute. I said what your grandmother called you was cute, but
Yeah, well, that's, that was part of it too, because, that was part of it.
wow.
And it was Vinny, it was Vincenzo, it was, a whole bunch of different things. But again, the only one that ever used my full name, used the full word Vincent, was my mom.
Wow.
And I always thought that it had something to do with Italian, looking for that story like you were. But as I got older and found out that what they simply did was they took my brother, my father, my uncle John, and they reversed his name. He was John Vincent, and they called me Vincent John. So.
Okay, so keeping it in the family, but giving you a little uniqueness.
Yeah.
I guess.
And, it wasn't long before I had to look up the meaning of Vincent, which means invincible, and I kind of love that. And then, and then John was beloved, so I used to, consider myself the invincible beloved, and that was an image I had of myself.
That kind of answers my next question, which pertain to have you liked the name, but what's not to like about that? Invincible and beloved. Well, really, many kids struggle with basic beliefs like I'm lovable, I matter, I'm important. So, right out of the gate, so to speak, it certainly told you are loved and important and strong.
Well, that was only my point of view. Now, the name itself, Vinnie, has, really, I have some great stories. I used to travel. I traveled through the South, and I also traveled around the world. And Vincent is a very rare name. And Vinnie is even rarer. And I think one quick story about Hong Kong. They don't have a phonetic, the alphabet they used didn't have a V in it. So anytime I was in the Orient, I was Winnie. And so that's one. So it was always hi Winnie. So I had to, instead of trying to correct people, I just lived with it. When I was dealing with people from the South, the deeper the South, the worse the problem. My name went from being Vinnie to Beanie, and Beanie, I didn't realize the fullness of that until somebody had made me reservations, and I was at the counter, and they didn't have, they couldn't find a reservation. And my last name, Nauheimer, is not an easy one either. It doesn't exactly roll off the top of your tongue. So when we finally figured it out, she showed me what the reservation was. And my name was VEENNEE.
Oh my goodness.
That's how they phonetically spelled Beanie.
Well, dialects do make a difference. I've often said I would love to have a great accent, and one time a person commented and said, "Oh, don't worry, you do." Yeah, and I haven't honestly, I haven't really appreciated a Boston accent early on. I probably sensed that there were different accents that were more sophisticated or acceptable or easy to understand. than a Boston accent. So I tried correcting my younger siblings so they wouldn't go through what I had gone through in the way of, I was in Virginia once at age 18, and I was on an elevator, and there were all these business guys, and they said, well, they were being kind, what number would you like us to press? And I said, part of my group is on the 4th floor and part of my group. And they said, are you from Boston? And I was so embarrassed that they knew. How could you miss it, right?
Yeah.
But a New York accent I find lovely. I really.
I had a Bronx accent. I grew up in the Bronx, and I never thought of myself having a Bronx accent. My mother's family was from Connecticut. I knew they all had accents because they all went out to the car, and like Boston.
Yeah, yeah.
And, then when I got in the Navy, and I had all these people kidding me about it, I would have people come up to me and say, would you say for me that you took your girlfriend to the bar in your brand new car? And they even had, they had pre-packaged sentences that they wanted me to speak, and they thought it was so cute. I was really never self-conscious about it. When I got out of service, I went to college, and actually before I go back to high school, I was on the speech team.
Yep.
And when I got into college, I took debate because I thought I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the thinking part of it, and speaking, and having to be on your feet. And when I got out of college, I went to work at JCPenney, and the merchandise manager asked me if I would consider taking speech lessons to get rid of my Bronx accent.
Wow.
I was horrified. I couldn't believe the guy said that to me.
At JCPenney, as
Yeah.
part of sales or just part of interacting?
I was hired as an assistant buyer.
Wow.
I was down on, was it 53rd Street and 6th Avenue. And the guy said to me, he said, would you consider taking speech lessons to help you get rid of your Bronx accent?
Oh my
And
God.
I was flabbergasted.
What did you do?
What do you think I did?
I got hold on, I got this timer thing and I want to pause it so it doesn't go off. And I was trying to keep track on, because I know when I get talking, I can go on and on. What do I think you did? Did you quit?
No, I didn't go that far. I just told him in a nice way, no.
Okay. Sure. Well, that was a very diplomatic way, and he accepted that?
Well, he didn't push the issue, and I stayed in my job until I quit. So,
okay.
It was, that was, talking about accents, I was totally shocked because I didn't believe that I had one. I knew what accents were, and I knew what a Midwest accent, my time in the service I met a cross current of people from all over the country.
Yeah.
And so I had developed an ear to understand. When, that was laid on me, I said, whoa.
Yeah. Well, it gets me thinking about whether or not he was well-intentioned. We talk about parents raising children in their own image to fit into a world the way they see it. I wonder if he had some experience where it didn't go well and he learned the hard way, or I don't know. I mean, you were there, so you probably knew from his tone a little more where he was coming from. But, I think I was watching something about the actors and actresses in the 30s and 40s in this country. And when you watch old movies, they seem to have a very similar trained delivery and dialect. And I did read that was taught. So that
they all went for elocution lessons.
Elocution.
And if you ever want to watch somebody, watch Carol Channing. I mean, she is just absolutely amazing how she articulates each word, each sound, the lips move. You know, it was a practiced art.
And I guess commensurate with how many parts they got too, because you had to fit a certain mold. I know I'm a little off topic here in terms of names, but hey, you know, in thinking about the show, and I say that a lot because it's still new, and I'm trying to let it happen a bit organically in terms of what is Soul Sister US. Well, it's singular because I feel as though it's an opportunity for me to be a little more me. I am very much myself in my role as a therapist, but there are boundaries, and there are stories you might, and vulnerabilities. Although I have to say I try to be very humble and honest about the things I don't know, or that are I've learned the hard way, that kind of thing. I think you are a caring person, and you look to help people in every arena, I think, whether it's your art. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I asked you if you had formal training as a photographer, but is art something you've also been self-taught, or have you?
No, that's another, I just pick it up and do it. I've always had an interest in it. And when I was a kid, somebody made the mistake of buying me a paint by numbers oil set. And that fascinated me, and I did a bunch of those. And then it wasn't until I got to my, I want to say early, mid-20s, I picked up canvas and brushes, and you know, I didn't have any formal training, but that doesn't mean I didn't read about it. Right. And I didn't know what I liked. So then I started oil painting, and I did it for about 5 years. And then I laid off it again until probably about 20 years ago, when I used it as a release for frustration in dealing with the clergy abuse crisis. Out came the brushes, and out came some incredibly powerful art.
Well, that was my segue, because as you were talking about painting, I was picturing some of the works that you've posted and featured on Facebook and in your recent video. And I can see that the artistic expression is really powerful around that subject. And I don't want to gloss over it, clergy abuse. One of the changes I made as a therapist was in reading about Alice Miller's work. She trained with Freud, and for 20 years in her practice operated very much as a neutral resource. Uh-huh. And it was at a moment when she was literally painting at home that she tapped into a tremendous amount of pain and awareness about memories. And when that happened to her, it correlated with an epiphany that went something like, wow, we're doing it all wrong. This whole neutrality and detachment from a client isn't what they need. What people need are really therapists who can be biased, who care at an intense or deep level, and aren't afraid to take a neutral stand when there's pain and abuse in particular.
Sure.
It certainly is a time where you need to know that people believe you, that they are willing to tolerate your story, whether it's in a painting. wish we had more time today, but maybe we'll use what we have left, for you to just give me a little idea about the movie that you made with Sam Adelman, and what the use of art was all
Well,
about.
we started this. I found it very therapeutic because you have an anger or a hurt that's so bottled up inside of you that words can't express. It just, you can't put it on words. And if you did write it, people got angry with you. I couldn't write a letter to a cardinal and tell them what I thought. Actually, I could and I did, but other people didn't, were not happy with that. And, but that letter was just between me and him. I needed something that could encapsulate what I was feeling. And I was absolutely, what's the word? I wasn't stunned, gratified to find out that there was a bunch of other people out there who were doing the same thing. And the question becomes, when you're dealing with a pain and you want to get it out, you got to get it out, otherwise it eats you up.
Yeah.
And there's a number of different ways, as the video show. The video is called Silent Screams, Art Created by Clergy Abuse, or something like that anyhow.
Silent Screams is pretty powerful.
Silent Screams, and that was one of my first paintings, and on the subject of clergy abuse. And so I, during the course of my advocacy for people who have suffered from abuse, I've run into a bunch of people who also used art, and not necessarily oil paintings like I did. One person is a tremendously gifted sculpturess, I guess. She did things with clay and her emotions that, I haven't seen anything like it, just unrivaled. I mean, you don't have to do anything but look at it. Then there was another person who did drawings. I was not in touch with that person. Unfortunately, that person committed suicide, and her mother got in touch with me and wanted to share the work that he had done. Again, just absolutely incredible work. And it went right to his soul. All you have to do is look at it and you could see the turmoil in his soul, the anger, the questioning, just, tremendous amount of tremendous work. We only used, I think, 4 or 5 people, their work, but I have a bunch of work from other people that, wanted to do it. There's some person that does computer art. She really knows how to use the computer to express herself.
I remember you, sorry, I remember you having a GoFundMe, and, I'm telling a lot of people that even doing this podcast is a much, I welcome it, but it's a tremendous learning experience for me, and I'm grateful for the patience of subscribers, however many there are. It's not the numbers so much as it's knowing that whatever we put out as a show resonates with people. And I think what I'll do is wind this up as, I was talking about what's in a name, but interestingly and organically, it's kind of come around to the name of your movie, Silent Screams. I believe captures the amount of thought you put into the name. How are we going to take this enormous and unthinkable, abysmal disgusting. I don't know. I've got a lot of words. Subject.
A lot of adjectives.
A lot of adjectives. You know, it's funny. Let me put, I think we're going to have an ambulance go by, so I'll mute myself for a sec. No, maybe not. On the show with John Moran, he said, I don't know what kind of podcast you have in terms of language and what's allowed. And I said, well, try me. And so he actually, you know, blurted out, well, you know, I wrote the nursing home. His mom's in a nursing home. And,
Sure.
you know, they weren't responding to my nice letters. So I wrote them the motherfucker letter. And I thought, oh, maybe, I don't know if I have to bleep this out or whatever. But I thought of telling you that because I know you know John, and that doesn't probably surprise you. But also in our own walks of life, sometimes I tell my clients nothing else will do. There are just certain words that empower, and I was taught not to swear, and now I don't mean to even say anything about sailors. I'm probably worse than a sailor. I don't know.
Well, I was a sailor for 4 years, so
Okay.
I can tell you a wonderful story about that.
All right, tell me.
We were at quarters one morning, and we had this brand new lieutenant who had very Christian values, and he did a 15-minute pontification on the use of profanity and how it was disgusting and how it shouldn't be used. And it was always profanity. He never used one example. And at the end of his pontification, he said, does anybody have any questions? I raised my hand, and he said, Nauheimer, what's your question? I said, what the fuck is profanity?
Oh. Well, Vinnie, on that note, and before the ambulance goes by,
Totally destroyed the whole meeting.
I bet you did. You know, less is more sometimes, isn't it?
Right.
I think that's awesome. I'm going to put the screen on the split screen so we can kind of wind this down, and
Okay.
you know, hopefully. I think there's a certain point in this type of art where you have to say, cut, that was good. Let's keep that one.
All right. No
So,
problem.
I won't repeat it, but I joke with my clients that I'm more likely to say those words on a Friday, and they kind of get a kick out of that.
Sure.
You know, the F notes or whatever. So we've just scratched the surface, and this is a podcast that I'm looking to have be a weekly, I keep saying looking, I'm in it now, that will be a weekly thing. Once we figure out how to upload the longer videos, which I like, this continuity to it, we'll see whether we have to cut it up or not. But my hope is that it gets to be shown in its entirety. So I thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For being here today, and I hope you will come back.
Oh, I will. The conversation, I loved it. I enjoyed this very much today.
All right, I did as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is what we do. This is how we roll.
That works for me.
All right. Thanks, Vinnie. Have a great day.
Okay, you too, Pandy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.